bringing happiness to the people. Gammadda, for the people, by the people.
Hello there, very good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime News on TV1 for the News First, where the people come first. I'm Martin Satyanesan. Let's start off with a look at your headlines for this afternoon. Sri Lanka to begin talks to restructure $1 billion national debt. Sri Lanka to tap 500 million rupee to purchase paddy. Coconut oil scam, a revelation from producers. Parliament names members to the National Council. Sri Lanka to ease glyphosate ban. Cabinet approves to import grain for animal feed. Public sector employees will be permitted to report to work in a suitable attire. On the top story this afternoon, the Ministry of Public Administration, Home Affairs, Provincial Councils and Local Government said a circular will be issued on Monday permitting public sector employees to report to work in a suitable attire.
Public Administration Secretary P.K. Mayaduna, speaking to Newsfirst, said that public sector employees will be allowed to wear any suitable attire in addition to what is recommended for public service. The decision was made considering the rapid increase in prices of saris and other clothing worn by public sector employees. He added that the circular on office attire for the public sector will be amended accordingly.
Is the Sri Lankan government facing financial issues in paying the salaries of public sector employees? Questions were raised at the weekly cabinet briefing on Friday.
රාජ්‍ය සේවයේ වැටුප් ගෙවීමට පවා මුදල් නැති අර්බුදකාරී තත්ත්වයක් මේ විදිහට තියෙන්නේ කියලා. එතකොට මේ තත්ත්වයත් එක්ක මනි ප්‍රින්ට් කරන්න මුදල් මුද්‍රණය කිරීමට සිදුවේද රජය ඒ වගේ තීරණයක් ගන්නවද? එහෙම ගන්නෙ නැහැ කියලා ජාත්‍යන්තර මූල්‍ය අරමුදලට මොකක් හරි සහතිකයක් කියලා දෙනවද කියලා රජය දැනගන්න කැමතියි.
නෑ සහතිකයක් කියන්නේ අපිට තවදුරටත් මේ යන ක්‍රමයේම පවත්වාගෙන ගියොත්
one of the key conditions is to maintain strict financial discipline in the public sector. If we continue with the existing system like other countries, we will not get aid to bridge the deficit. In 2003, we introduced the Fiscal Management Responsibility Act. If we do not follow the regulations in the Act, we will not be able to control the finances. Therefore, we will not stop paying the salaries. What we will do is move treasury allocations to pay the salary. At present, managing this situation is difficult. We must reveal the true situation to the people and have better fiscal management with financial discipline. If we print money, inflation will peak and the cost of living will become a serious issue.
මේ මුදල් පසුපස බඩුමිල පසුපස මුදලත් තමයි මේ එමෙන් ඉතා විශාල උද්දමන පීඩනයකට රටක් මුහුණ දෙනවා. එතකොට මේ ජීවන වියදමේ අර්බුදය දරා ගන්න ජනතාවට අසීරු වෙනවා. මේක තාක්ෂණික කරුණ.
Crisis in Sri Lanka today will begin the tricky task of debt renegotiations with a raft of private and bilateral creditors.
Finance Secretary Mahinda Sinivardana told Newsfirst that all creditor nations will join the discussion and the plan is to provide them a better understanding on Sri Lanka's debt restructuring process. Sri Lanka will be represented by the Finance Ministry officials and personnel from the Central Bank of Sri Lanka.
Meanwhile, International Monetary Fund's chief Kristalina Georgieva warned on Wednesday that there will be people on the street globally unless steps are taken to protect the most vulnerable from inflation.
We need to recognize that the world has changed. It is much more shock-prone than it used to be. And we have to think how we build resilience to these shocks. From the IMF standpoint, we see two most important factors. One, a stubborn inflation has to be fought with stubborn actions of central banks because price stability is critical for investors to invest and for consumers to consume. And let's remember, inflation is a tax on the poor. Two, make sure that support that is provided doesn't go to everybody, that it goes to the people in highest need. It is important to think that This compounded impact of multiple crises is already testing the patience and resilience of people. And if we don't take action to support the most vulnerable, there would be consequences, people on the street.
Foreign Minister Ali Sabri met US President Joe Biden at the reception hosted by the President of the United States, Joe Biden, on the occasion of the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly today. Minister Ali Sabri will deliver the Sri Lanka statement at the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly tomorrow in New York. Sri Lanka's cabinet spokesperson revealed that a conspiracy took place to deprive the country of on-time coal imports.
Minister Dr. Bandalu Gunawardena, the country's cabinet spokesperson, told reporters on Friday that a conspiratorial plan is afoot to deny on-time coal delivery and to extend power cuts. He said that the coal tender that was awarded recently was for a bid that was lower than what was offered last year. The minister said that due to technical and legal issues, if Sri Lanka fails to import coal on time, it would lead to a crisis, and therefore it was decided by the Cabinet of Ministers to appoint a cabinet subcommittee to make an emergency decision that is paramount for the country and to make purchases in a manner that does not affect the people. He said that all necessary decisions will be made by the subject minister and the cabinet subcommittee to prevent a shutdown of the power plant that would lead to extended power cuts. The minister said coal procurement will be made as an emergency national requirement that will not affect the people in any way.
Sri Lanka's cabinet approves a proposal to appoint a subcommittee to make recommendations to establish an Electronic Media Regulatory Authority Act. The cabinet also...
Following discussions with the relevant stakeholders, the Cabinet of Ministers approved a proposal to appoint a subcommittee to make recommendations to establish an Electronic Media Regulatory Authority Act that will lead to a better media culture in the country that will be up to international standards.
Cabinet අනුකාරක සභාවක් පත් කරන්නට අනුමැතිය ලබා දුන්නා.
The cabinet also approved the president's proposal to limit overseas visits by ministers, state minister to essential travel only. The All Ceylon Traditional Coconut Oil Manufacturers Association convened a media briefing in Kurunagala and made a revelation.
2019-20 කාලෙදී එකල තිබු රජයේ ජනාධිපතිතුමා මේ පොල් තෙල් වලට තියෙන බදු අයින්.
During the period of 2019 to 2022, the former president gave tax concessions to importers. A coconut oil ship carrying 15,000 metric tons of coconut oil will arrive in our country tomorrow. The value of the ship is $17.5 million. With this tax concession, they will earn more than 3 billion rupees as profit. The local producers have made the country self-sufficient in coconut oil, and we have excess. At this moment, we do not have money for medicines, food, fuel and fertilizer. Why is the ministry awarding such concessions to import coconut oil when we have an excess in the local production? This is an attempt to allow some importers to make massive profits. We request the government to ban coconut oil imports.
සම්පූර්ණ ස්වයංපොෂිත රටද ආහාරමය සඳහා පොල් තෙල් ආනයනය සම්පූර්ණ තහනම් කරන්න.
The Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka approved the Ceylon Electricity Board's request for power cuts of 2 hours and 20 minutes from 23rd to 25th of September.
Accordingly, 1 hour and 1 hour and 20 minutes power cut will be imposed during the day and the night respectively. Approval for extended power cuts was granted after considering the unavailability of the old Lakshapana Stage 1, lack of fuel availability at West Coast and due to sudden increase in demand.
The government has planned to access 500 million rupees from the Farmers Trust Fund and the Agricultural and Agrarian Insurance Board to purchase paddy, and Cabinet has approved the decision.
Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, Rohana Pushpakumara, said that such a decision was taken during a discussion held yesterday, presided by the Minister of Agriculture. Accordingly, 200 million rupees will be obtained from the Farmers Trust Fund. 300 million rupees is scheduled to be obtained from the Agricultural and Agrarian Insurance Board. This amount will be given as a loan to the Paddy Marketing Board. The Agriculture Secretary further said that with the receipt of this money, the purchase of paddy for the Yalla season will resume. Agriculture Minister Mahinda Amaraveera told Newsfirst that at the cabinet meeting on Thursday it was decided to release the money for the tranches.
The cabinet has granted approval to import 25,000 metric tons of maize or related grain for the production of animal feed. Cabinet spokesperson and Minister Dr. Bandula Gunawardena told reporters that the Food Promotion Board was granted permission to import 25,000 metric tons of maize of suitable grain to produce animal feed approved by the Department of Animal Production and Health. Farmers in Bibile say that the prices of turmeric in the market does not meet their production cost.
Turmeric farmers say that it is a crisis when they do not have a proper price as they only cultivate turmeric once a year. Turmeric farmers say that last year the government instructed to cultivate turmeric. However, now the government seems to disregard the issues of the farmers.
The All Island Farmers Federation noted that claims being made that food items are contaminated could be a ploy by those involved in corrupt political deals. They brought down a ship with contaminated fertilizer to loot money. Then they brought down 3 posher that contained chemicals, and then they brought down rice that contained chemicals. Beside this individual stealing, they are now feeding the people of the country with poison. This is a cabinet that feeds poison to the entire country. Sri Lanka's cabinet of ministers granted approval to ease the ban that was imposed on glyphosate. Accordingly, glyphosate will be permitted to be imported to the country under strict supervision.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe had tabled the cabinet memorandum on easing the ban of glyphosate, considering the concerns raised by the Sri Lankan farmers. Earlier, Sri Lanka granted permission to import glyphosate only for tea plantations.
The vote of condolence on the demise of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II took place in the Sri Lankan Parliament on Friday in the presence of President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
Queen Elizabeth II is no more. Therefore, I request Honourable Speaker, and I am supporting the motion moved by the Honourable Prime Minister, to convey to His Majesty King Charles III and members of the royal family our condolences. I conclude this tribute to Queen Elizabeth II of Ceylon, the last of our royal line, which began with King Vijaya, with these verse: Anikka vatta sankarang upadavaya dhammino upaditva nirunjantu te sam people suko. Impermanent are formations subject to rise and fall. Having risen, they cease. Their subsiding is bliss. Thank you.
The Queen visited our shores on 3 occasions. First time as a princess with Prince Philip on their honeymoon, and 2 other occasions later during the course of her 7-decade reign as Queen. She touched the people of Sri Lanka with sympathy and kindness whenever our people were afflicted by tragedy and disaster. Queen Elizabeth II was also head of the Commonwealth, and today Sri Lanka Parliament joins together with the extended Commonwealth Parliaments in sorrow and mourning of her loss. Like his mother before him, the King has a deep and lasting connection to Sri Lanka, a love of beautiful country, and hopefully a deep affection towards our people. May the Queen Elizabeth II rest in peace and achieve the supreme bliss of Nirvana.
I want to impress upon the chamber the notion of the Queen, or in this case a king, as a sovereign of the people. The idea that one person can represent a definitive authority within a hierarchy. It is worth pursuing to understand the role of the monarch, and how well Queen Elizabeth II discharged the duties of her role so diligently over a 70-year period. The tradition of the Prime Minister meeting the monarch once a week is part of this notion of the sovereign. Just consider that the Prime Minister, with all the lawful constitutional powerful powers, must diligently, without fail, every week, week in, week out, pay a visit to the monarch, literally bow before the sovereign and update them on the happenings of government, while also taking advice from the monarch on any matter which they see fit. This tradition of a Prime Minister bowing before the monarch is a manifestation of the ideal that the monarch represents something bigger than the office of the Prime Minister, something beyond the powers of government. The sovereign is another representation of the will of the people, of the stakeholders of the wider state. As the head of state, the monarch must be respected. That respect is what is cloaked in the romanticism of the sovereign.
During the reign of the Queen, there were separations and unifications of countries. In the midst of all this, she lived as an undefeated queen. She visited Sri Lanka twice as queen and visited historic sites in the country. Her conduct during all visits was witnessed as one which was very much appropriate for royalty. The people of Sri Lanka remember her with respect. She also respected our country.
Members of Parliament have been nominated by the respective political parties to serve in the National Council. However, the Samagi Jana Balawegaya, National People's Power and the Dallas Alaha faction did not nominate members to the National Council. National Council will consist of the Speaker of the Parliament as the Chair, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the House of Parliament, the Leader of the Opposition in Parliament, the Chief Government Whip, and not more than 35 members of Parliament representing the 9th Parliament from recognized political parties in Sri Lanka as determined by the leaders of the political parties. The resolution proposed by the Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena to constitute the Parliament Committee called the National Council was passed in Parliament without objection. The National Council will have the jurisdiction and general responsibilities in order to determine the general priorities of Parliament, to guide the formulation of short, medium and long-term national policies, agree on short and medium-term common minimum programs in respect of the stabilization of the economy, and arrange special meetings with the ministers of the Cabinet of Ministers, the National Council, the chairpersons of the special committees and youth observers of youth organizations. The Samiragama Muslim Vidyalaya in Putlam was given an RO plant by Gammadda to end their search for clean drinking water. The Samiragama Muslim Vidyalaya in Putlam is located in one of the most rural areas, and access to clean drinking water was issued for many years for the 170 students and teachers. Gammadda stepped forward to resolve this issue in February, and the project was supported by the Mushin family and the Siddhi Haiza Foundation. For the Mushin family, the contribution was made in memory of ARM Mushin, Khairun Niza Mushin and Shiana Mushin. Today the project was vested with the public upon completion. The program to create the longest painting in the country with the participation of school children from all over the island is on day 23. The program is being conducted in the Kegol district today.
United We Stand is the theme of the longest painting by Sri Lankan school children that is being created for the World Children's Day 2022, which falls on the 1st of October. This work of art is expected to be 1,000 feet long, and today's artwork was contributed by students from the Hettimulla Navamahavidyalaya. Day 24 of the program will be on Saturday in the Gampaha district. The program is organized by Sirasa TV in association with the Ministry of Education.
Shifting your attention to international news, the Association of Lebanese Banks has announced that Lebanon's banks are to remain closed indefinitely due to ongoing risks to employees and customers.
The shutdowns follow a series of hold-ups across the country over the past month, with at least 5 separate banks held up by depositors last Friday alone in attempt to retrieve savings frozen in the banking system. Millions of Lebanese citizens have been locked out of their accounts after the country plunged into financial crisis in October 2019, with local currency since losing 90% of its value. More than 3/4 of the population have been pushed into poverty and more are unable to pay for their basic items. With many people using means of armed weapons and threats to kill bank staff over access to frozen accounts, this decision was taken to ensure safety to employees and other bank staff.
A new Russian military mobilization sees several Russian men seen attempting to leave the country, causing queues to form at border crossings as they try to avoid a military call-up for the Ukraine war.
President Vladimir Putin announced a partial military mobilization on Wednesday, which could see 300,000 people summoned to serve in the war. At the border alongside Georgia, miles-long queues of vehicles have been formed, including several numbers of men trying to escape the war, mainly due to the fact that Georgia is one of the few neighboring countries that Russians can enter without needing to apply for visa. Some witnesses estimated the queue of cars at the upper last checkpoint to be far as 5 kilometers long, while most others stated it had taken 7 hours to cross the border. Video footage from the scene shows drivers leaving their cars or trucks temporarily in standstill traffic.
From that, we bring to a close this edition of Lunchtime News on TV1. For details of these stories and much more, simply log on to our website www.newsfirst.lk. For the News First, where the people come first, I'm Martin Satyanes, and you take care and have a nice day.